I'm going to use exercise 1 in the describing and interrogating data worksheet to just give you an idea of the where we're coming from in terms of testing. So whenever we're writing code, it's really important that we test that not only it runs, but that it gives us the right results. And so in most of the exercises that we give you, we will either give you some expected output. So if you get this input, this is what the expected output should look like, or we will actually have some test code included in the exercise, or in the code cell for the exercise. That I'll show you that a little bit later. But in this case, here's an exercise. It's got a set of things that it needs you to do, and then it's got the expected output. So basically, if we get this right, if we do the things that it says to do in there, we would expect to see what we can see here. Now, if there's a lot of very varied output, this is probably the best way for us to be able to test that you've got the right answers, or if you've got the right code. So I'm just going to think about here how we can do this. So we will normally give you a fair amount of the code already, and expect you to fill in the rest. So wherever there's a gap in the code, then we're expecting you to fill it in. In this case, we are going to read the Titanic database, or data set, and it's a CSV. So we are going to use read CSV, and inside that we are going to put in the URL, which is that, and that will read the CSV for us. We have then got a function called getSummary, which is the function that we're supposed to be writing, and that summary will show summary statistics. Function's called summary. It's going to display the first 5 rows of the data set, then it's going to use info to display technical summary, and describe to display a numerical summary. So the first 5 rows should look like this at the top. The info should look like this next section, and the summary, the describe, should look like that last section. So we've got 3 things we need to do. We've filled in the bit where it opens the file, remembering what we did in the retrieving data worksheet, and we then need to do 3 things. We need to print, or we need to display the first 5 rows. So I'm going to start off with display, which is the alternative in pandas for print. We could use print as well, but we're going to print the data frame, the first 5 rows. So we've got head. So we're going to display df.head. Now the data frame is called df here because that's the name that is given it in the brackets. So where this gets the data frame from is not the Titanic data frame, although that's the data it's going to be using. It's getting the data frame from the variable that's passed in through the function's brackets, and that's called a parameter or an argument. So in this case, we'll call it a parameter. So df is the data frame that is passed through the brackets, and the way that that's passed through the brackets is when we actually run this function, we will, in the brackets here, give it the actual data frame that we want it to work with. So in this case, we're just saying run the getSummary function with the Titanic data frame. If we look at this bit, it doesn't care that this is the Titanic data frame. What it cares about is that it's given a data frame to work with, and it will always refer to it as df. df is used locally, so that it's a copy, and it's used independently of Titanic. So any changes that you make to the data frame in here will not affect the Titanic data frame. That's safe. That's outside the function, and that's why we use df rather than Titanic in here. So we've displayed the head, which is the first 5 rows. We want to display df.info, which is the information about it, and then we want to display the describe, and that's the 3 things that we need to do. We haven't got any data to return in this function, so we don't necessarily need a return at the end, so I won't put that in. But if I run this, it should show us a set of output that looks like the set of output that we were given in our expected output just above the cell. And there it goes. So we've got the first 5 rows, the info, and then we've got the description, the statistics at the bottom. And that should match, although it doesn't look absolutely the same, but it should match what's there. That's because it's been copied as text. So that's one way that we might test our output. We think about what the expected output is first, and this is what we want you to start doing yourself later on in the course. Think first about when I run this function, what am I expecting to get as the answers? Sometimes you won't know because you're working with big data sets, and sometimes you will know. So we've run that, we know what is expected, and we've put that in as the expected output. So that's an example of how we would use expected output.